Let me just borrow a couple of minutes. Okay. So participants, just to check, is my screen visible to all of you?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I hope I'm quite audible enough to all the participants. Am I audible to all of you?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Let's continue then. So once again, a very good morning and good evening, wherever you're joining from, participants. I'm Kumar, and I will be the trainer for this training program. And the agenda of this session is very simple. We will first take a complete overview of what Azure Cloud has to offer and how to go ahead and build DevOps pipelines onto the Azure. For that, what Azure has to offer is something that we'll go ahead and understand. That will be the agenda. And once we are done, we will go ahead and take time to, I'll start taking your questions and you put me questions, and then I'll try to answer as much as I can. So during that, you have any questions? If you have the option enabled, you can drop a question in the chat window. If not, you can ask me the question by end of the session. So participants, by now everyone are aware that the industry is going majorly towards cloud. And when it starts to move into cloud, they expect the skill sets are to be built on top of cloud. So what is meant by skill sets? That means when you join the company, you are required to go ahead and work with them and help them in building their infrastructure on cloud. So when it comes to cloud has to offer many things. Cloud has to offer a lot of services. You can get, by click of a button, a server on cloud. You can store your data. You can store your data as part of the databases by creating databases on cloud. There are a lot of things that cloud has to offer. On DevOps, what Azure has to offer, because when application starts to get developed on cloud, what kind of developer related services that cloud has to offer, what services that are offered for the administration team so that they can smoothen the release of the application, which is done by the development team, pull that code and deploy it. So participants, let's start to spend understanding all this in detail. So to put the statement, participant, Azure is a public cloud. It's available in every part of the world. They're globally available. So that you have a confidence that tomorrow, if your projects host on cloud, if your company wants to go global, they can start moving from one part of the country to another part of the country, wherever they want to move the data. So it's a global solution that is offered to you, because they're widely spread in all the countries. They have strong networks across all these countries. They're strongly connected by global networks. So this makes companies to go global in no time. The point is, let's say the client starts having their operations in India, they can grow immediately by moving their infrastructure into Europe region, to Asia Pacific regions. They can go into US regions, Australian. So they can expand their infrastructure readily into other regions. That is the power of Azure Cloud. But more importantly, to start with, you have to consider one base region in Azure Cloud to start. Then you will replicate into other regions. So how do you go ahead and get access into Azure? So you have to identify and you have to be given access. That is where IAM service will come in. So based upon a particular scenario, you are able to get to see services offered. An example, you have joined a company. Your identity initially before joining the company is just a visitor. You are just an interviewer or the one who is taking the interview, and you are the one who is attending the interview and the interviewer will take an interview. So you are just a visitor to a company. So you will visit the company, you will meet the person, you will have an interview. Once you get selected, you become an employee. Likewise, in cloud, we have to define who that person is, what kind of access does he have. So based upon it, they will decide, okay, Kumar is an employee of the company now. So we have to designate him with admin privileges. If not, read-only privileges. So that is an identity. Identity is Kumar. I am identified as Kumar, an employee of my company. Likewise, when you work for the client will identify you that you are an employee of this company and you have this identity. Let's go ahead and give you access into their account as admin or a read-only user or a power user, some kind of privileges they'll give you. So keeping in context those kind of scenarios where they have to have identification, both hybrid and a cloud model, they have something like Azure Directory. The Azure Directory is a service that will identify your identity, that what kind of identity do we have. Continuing to that, they have other services like Azure Active Directory, B2C, Azure Active Directory, DSS. So they are advanced services. They come into picture when you are working with applications, apps. That means app have to be identified. If you're working with virtual machines, ADSS will come in. So based upon a requirement, you get to see some services that Azure has to offer. Participants, everyone, are you with me? So the logic that you have to understand in this scenario is that if an application have to be given an access to Azure services, what kind of service you will go and use in Azure for identifying that application. If there is a user, his need to be identified and given access, what kind of service that you will use in Azure Active Directory. So in Azure Active Directory, we go ahead and create users and attach permissions to that user and allow them to perform actions into that account. So once a user is identified, once he's given access, then you will start building infrastructure into the Azure cloud. So what you will do, you will have to start building. So in order to start building, you need a place or you need a service where you can put all these resources at one place, like a network to place at one place. So Azure has a lot of resources to be given for you into networks. Like you can start with virtual networks. Let me take you into the portal. So if I want to go ahead and create a network, what Azure has to offer under networking? Azure has to offer plenty of services. You'll go ahead and create a virtual network to put all your resources at one place so that it becomes easy for you to manage them. Likewise, when it comes to machines in Azure cloud, so the data that comes in to the network and the data that goes out the network will reach your machines. That means there will be a network. Inside that network, there will be a machine. Into that machine, the data starts to come in and the data starts to go out. So we need a load balancer to do this operation, to receive the traffic and send the traffic and mask your machines. In another scenario, if you need to connect to your machines securely from on-prem into Azure cloud, network gateway is required. Azure virtual network or VPN gateway is required. So does Azure has to offer? Yes, Azure offers it in site-to-site VPN concept, where you can go ahead and provision machines and have a VPN connectivity laid from on-prem to cloud. If you continue further, what more Azure has to offer if I have to go ahead and use under networking? They offer something like traffic manager, express route, DNS. So what are they useful for? What are they used for? Participants, if you are browsing an application or any website, you will visit www.example.com. This is a URL that you will visit. This URL in the background have to get DNS resolved. That means there should be a DNS resolution for this. So in order to do this, Azure helps you to do this by creating a DNS resolution network, or it helps you to go ahead and create Azure DNS, and like you can go ahead and register a domain and do a DNS resolution. And in the DNS resolution, instead of going to a third party and getting the DNS services, Azure DNS services are built to provide you the DNS services which will help you to resolve IP addresses into URLs into IP addresses. Likewise, while you're handling a network, you'll come across traffic from global locations. How do you do a distribution? Traffic manager. While handling networks in Azure cloud, you will be having requirements to connect the on-prem servers to cloud servers. And you will prefer a private network connectivity, express route. Participants, everyone, are we clear? Hello? So under the networking, you have seen various scenarios where you can create a own virtual network where you can put all your resources. You can connect to this network from on-prem to cloud via VPN gateway. You can bring outside traffic and connect to this network via load balancer. You can go ahead and resolve networks outside the internet, over the internet, by domain names. So what Azure has to offer under the networking, there are plenty, not only these services, there are plenty other services under networking. So I did give you some vital services that will be helpful for building your networks. Under networks, if you see, there are plenty of services, load balancers, networks, public IPs, private IPs, plenty of services. So they are useful based upon the project requirement. From there, let's go ahead and continue into the compute part of it. What is compute? Purely servers, I would say. If you want to understand in a simple word, compute, it's all about servers that you need to run your apps. So Azure has to offer a lot of services under compute. You can get server-based solutions that involve Linux machines called Azure Virtual Machines, Windows machines under Azure Virtual Machines. You can scale those machines automatically by adapting to VMS scale sets. If you don't want to use machines to run your apps, if you want to use functions, you get to see serverless applications called Azure Functions. If you're developing applications, keeping in mind containers like Docker, Kubernetes applications. So if a development is targeted towards that environment, you can build as a developer Docker images and deploy into Docker containers. So for that, Azure has to offer container instances. And keeping in mind, if you're working on Kubernetes projects where you need to run Kubernetes services, you get to see AKS, Azure Kubernetes Service, fully managed Kubernetes cluster. If you want to go ahead and have a fully managed platform to run your apps that gets easily integrated with web and mobile platforms, app services from Azure. So for server-based solutions, you have serverless solutions, you have web applications, you have mobile applications, you have containers, you have Dockers, you have Kubernetes, you have every other domain that you look for under compute category, you will find some or the other solution from Azure. Server, serverless, compute, functions, serverless functions. And now what you want to do, if a network is designed, applications are running, data is getting generated. That means you need to store your data. When it comes to storage, what is storage? Storage is all about storing your data. When it comes to storage, I can go ahead and store the data the way it is received. But if a data that have no structure for me, then I have to go ahead and decide a storage. But if I have a structure, what I meant is, if I can go ahead and look at my data, the possibilities are that it might have a structure that I can identify what kind of structure it is. Or if it doesn't have any structure, it becomes unstructured data set. If not, there is another category I'll not discuss about it called semi-structure, which is both structure and unstructured. Example, the data that is available in the form of the spreadsheets that you, Excel sheets, and the data that is available in the form of an image for you, the image data. So the point is, participants, now you are deciding to store the data. So at the time of storage, you have to go ahead and consider what is that you want to store. The data that is available in the form of spreadsheets to store, or the data that is available in the form of images that you want to store. Not only images, there are plenty other unstructured data sets. So here I would prefer the data that is available in the form of spreadsheets to store into a database. And if it's unstructured, I would like to go ahead and use cloud storage just because I need to store the data. That's all. So cloud storage. So based upon this, we have plenty of services under the storage category to store your data sets. You can go ahead and start storing your binary large objects. Blob storage we have, like images, videos. Next, moving from there, continuing the storage. If you have to store operating system, or if you have to run operating system, you need a storage to run your operating system and keep that storage associated with your disks to run. Or you need to create a file system to store your data, disk storages. You need a file storage on the network, file storage. There will be scenarios where you want to go ahead and store your data in form of queues, queue storage. So if this is what storage requirement satisfies, next we have the database, because we have to store our data into the database for keeping the structured data sets. SQL databases, NoSQL databases, MySQL, PostgreSQL, managed databases, unmanaged databases. NoSQL database offering in Azure, we call it as Cosmos DB. SQL databases, Azure SQL databases. In that SQL databases, Azure databases, we have support for MySQL, PostgreSQL, MariaDB. You can also have machines created. On top of those machines, you can create SQL databases, or you can go ahead and take services from Azure, because Azure is Microsoft and Microsoft database services is MS SQL. You will get MS SQL on a managed service. What is managed service means? You go ahead and ask Azure, I need a MS SQL server. It'll ask you, please give me a configuration for your server. You can start using that server. If not, you can go ahead and provision your own virtual machine, install virtual machine with that SQL server, and perform the operations. And there will be scenarios where you are required to do kind of migrations. How do you migrate a database? Database migration services are available. So now, participants, if you have seen, we have come to a point where Azure, under these top major categories like compute, network, storage, and databases, it has to offer a plenty of services for you. And you have seen list of services that Azure has to offer. So participants, why did I go ahead and talk about these services? Because these services are our building blocks. They are our building blocks. We build a network. Into that network, we run our compute machines. We generate applications, or we run applications into those servers, which generate the data. We store the data in storage or unstructured data sets and structured data sets, which store into databases. So this is our infra side. We are focusing on the infra side. What happens when we want to develop an application? Let's say an application called a Java application I want to develop, or a .NET application I want to develop, and I want to develop that. And the developer is going to give me the code and saying, hey, here is your code. Take your code and deploy it into your cloud infrastructure. So at that time, it becomes very difficult for me to go ahead and do a deployment. Deployment is going to be a very challenging job for me when it comes to deployment. The developers will give me the code, but how will I go ahead and do a deployment? It's like I received a request to travel from point A to point B, but I assume that I don't know how to. If I assume that if you people don't know, and if we don't know the direction to drive from point A to point B, it's going to be a very challenging job. So we need to take this code from the developer, that is our point A, and we need to go ahead and move this code into point B into our cloud. So we have to find a best and a better way to do this. And the best and the better way to do is something that we have a very good process. That means we are bringing dev team and the deployment into it, that is the ops team into it. So that is where people, DevOps, do come into our picture. So we have to go ahead and build a DevOps pipeline into Azure cloud. A pipeline have to be built by us so that we can go ahead and start doing a deployment into Azure cloud. So participants, everyone, did you get the logic here? So there will be a developer who will write the code. We will take the code and we will start doing the code deployment to Azure cloud. So to address that, we have to go ahead and look what Azure has to offer under Azure services of DevOps. So let me just take you into the Azure DevOps organization participants. This is a service that is offered by Azure under DevOps category. Into this Azure DevOps category, you will get to see the organizations. You are required to create an organization. And once you create organizations, you will start using this DevOps services to create an account, build the pipeline. So there are a couple of projects in my account in the organization already. One is a beta 1 project. The other one is .NET 1 project. So in this project, how do you go ahead and take the requirements? You go ahead and take the requirements. You get all those requirements on a day-to-day work. What is happening, you'll get to see. You'll write the code. The source code is written here. You'll write pipelines to build the pipeline. See, I built a pipeline. This is a build pipeline. Then I will go ahead and do a release pipeline and release it where you want to release. That's very interesting. If you click on the release pipeline, it'll ask you where you want to release. I want to go ahead and release into Azure. See, this is what is all about infrastructure. So where you want to release, you want to release into app, you want to release into a Kubernetes cluster, where you want to release. You want to release into an application, virtual machine. That is where participants, our journey of Azure infrastructure is required. You are required to go ahead and build your skill sets on Azure platform. Everyone, are you with me, people?
Yes.
So DevOps is all about connecting the dots. Like we have our development on one side and the operations on the other side. We go ahead and consider both of their efforts. So they will build a pipeline and release the code. So into this, we are required to use portal, or we need to go ahead and have an account with Azure. As you know, Microsoft Cloud Computing Platform is branded as Azure, Microsoft Azure. So in order to go ahead and use Microsoft Azure, you have to create an account with them. And this is the portal method of logging into the account. You are using portal to log in. And in portal, you will find everything, whatever that you want to see, you will find everything that you want. You can create a resource. You can create a SQL database. You can create a virtual server. The one that you have recently created. A dashboard to see what is happening on your account. Now, this is a portal that will help you to perform all these actions. You can even search by the services. So you are required to go ahead and use portal. But portal has its own advantages as well as limitations. And not say disadvantages, limitations, I will call. For example, I have to go ahead and perform an operation. For example, I have a resource group. There are a couple of resource groups that I have. A resource group, by the definition, is purely about collecting resources and keeping them at one place. For example, in a resource group called My Resource Group, I have a storage account with me. I use this storage account to store my data. So resource group can be created by just create a resource group and give a name called My New Resource Group. This is the name of the resource group. And review and create it. Does create a resource group. What happens if you go ahead and start creating resources? You will keep all your resources into this new resource group. you can keep all your resources into this new resource group. Whatever you want to create, you can create and keep them as part of your resource group. But if it has to be created, the creation has to be done programmatically. That means there shouldn't be people involved. So I have to write a code for it. I have to write a command for it. So let me show you how will I do the same thing using Azure. Azure, can you go ahead and create me a resource group? Azure resource or Azure groups list, 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 groups list. Oh, it is group, not groups, group list. So it is expected to give me list of Azure subscriptions, resource groups. Let me try to put it in a table if it is allowing me to put into a table so that I can see a nice table for all the resource groups. Yep. The same resource group, I got it on my command prompt. RG, Visual Studio, Kumar RG, new resource group. Now, let me show you how will I go ahead and create another resource group. AZ group, create resource group, create new resource group create name and my new resource group using command. Location, I'll keep it in West US. So I'm expected to have a new resource group. There you go, participants. A new resource group did come up. You can see here a new resource group. Let me run the previous command to see that is listed here. There you go, my new RG resource group using command. This is, and it got located in West US. Take a confirmation from portal. There you go, my new resource group. Everyone, are we clear? Now I would like to go ahead and delete them. Azure group, can you delete the new resource group? Azure group, delete my resource group. Okay, delete hyphen resource group. It needs to know what you are trying to do. Resource group, delete the resource group. Would you like to perform? Yes. Now, participants, why did I go ahead and used Azure CLI to do this, participants? To give you an insight that in real life situations, portal is used for connecting to your account, performing the actions. But there will be scenarios where you need to do automations also. In that automation scenarios, portal will be limited for you. That means you cannot use beyond a limit portal. You cannot run portal commands to do all these actions. You cannot run all these commands to run the actions like you do in CLI in your portal. So for that scenario, people, when you're targeting automation, you have to use either Azure Shell, or if you are comfortable, you can use PowerShell, Azure PowerShell. AZ get -az resource RUSOV source group. So it is expected to get me the resource group that I've created into my portal. See the same resource groups. So participants, CLI are the powerful way of handling, creating the resources, managing the resources. When you work as a Azure DevOps engineer, you will be working with automation a lot. Automation is the major idea behind the Azure DevOps engineering. That means everything that you go ahead and create into Azure is backed up by Azure pipelines or DevOps pipelines, which target automation at every stage in this pipeline. So why it is important? It is obvious, right? When you want to move from one part to the other part, you need a direction. Similarly, when you want to move your code from developer machine into cloud, you will need a process. So that process, participants, I call it as DevOps or DevOps engineering, the subject for the DevOps engineering. So participants, I hope you had a quick glance and overview of Azure services. And I hope you had a glance about DevOps services that Azure has to offer and what we will be doing here as part of the practice. Are we good, everyone? Participants, are we good?
Yeah, yes.
Yes, Kumar, I have one doubt. So, is it like a part of Azure DevOps only, or Azure admin and development is also be included here? Hello.
Okay. So thank you for asking the question. Now let's begin the Q&A session. So the question that is given to me is that this topic is for Azure DevOps, or is it for Azure DevOps? Azure. Can you request the participants to just there is an audio in the background? Yeah. So participants, let me help you out how to go ahead and look into Azure DevOps. So what I'll do, I will go ahead and give you a path that will help you to get a clear picture. If you are looking forward for Azure DevOps, this is the path that Microsoft recommends everyone to use or everyone to take, Azure DevOps. So what I will do, I will go ahead and take the certification path. Because if I go ahead and say, hey, Kumar, you are designing your own path, let me go ahead and give you the path given by Microsoft. So when you want to become Azure DevOps engineer, which is being targeted by AZ 400, in order to write out the exams, you have to go ahead, either take Azure Associate, which is admin, or you can take developer. Then you will be able to go ahead and take the exam. So this is a path that Azure recommends, that or you can take this or that. So as part of this path of Azure DevOps that we go ahead and do, we recommend participants to consider both. Instead of or this or that for your journey to start, we recommend take this and this, that is admin and developer. So what will happen? You will learn the efforts of an administrator, build the skills of an administrator, and build the skills of a developer. Then you will understand what is the certification is all about. Then you go ahead and give your exam. Otherwise, what will happen? This may be sufficient for your exam. You can take admin 204 and write your AZ 400. That is sufficient for your exam. But in real life, it's half that you'll only know the admin part of it, but you don't know development part of it. That is the reason we recommend that you go ahead and consider both and attempt your DevOps engineering. That's how the module is designed. Hope that answers your question. This is the path that is given by Microsoft, where choice is given, but instead of sticking to the choice, we go ahead and take both as part of the learning. Yeah. Any more questions, participants? Do we have?
Is clear, Kumar. And I know what are the roles and responsibilities while we are searching for this on this domain? Is it kind of only Azure DevOps engineer or any other roles also?
Good question, by the way.
Infrastructure engineer, something like we can able to see in our career in hiring portals.
Well, very good. I appreciate your question. Good question. So you can go ahead and start connecting or marketing your profile. If you are interested, you can go ahead and say, I'm an Azure DevOps engineer. I'm an Azure cloud engineer. I'm a Azure cloud consultant. Okay. You can go ahead and treat yourself as an Azure admin engineer. You can go ahead and brand yourself as an Azure developer. These are the names that you can go and brand yourself. This is my suggestion for you. After this course completion, you can brand yourself in this ways.
Oh, thank you. Azure infrastructure engineer?
That is part of admin, right? Cloud consultant, cloud engineering. Here, the name itself says ops. Ops is all about infra. Ops, admin. Developer, that means you have some development skills on Azure.
Yeah. Okay, got it. Thank you, Kumar.
Welcome, participants. Participants, do you have any questions that I would?
Hey, Kumar.
Yep.
Yeah. I believe SkillReach will provide any code for any subscription to work on these things, or we need to purchase separately.
Okay, I'm sure this question might be running through all the other people mindsets. Since you put this question, I'm very happy to discuss. The point is, for new participants or new registrations like you, if you reach out to Microsoft Azure, they'll be very happy to give you an offer. The offer is, for the next 1 month, they will give you $200 USD for free of cost. If you go ahead and register with them, some roughly about 16,000 bucks into your account, they'll give you. That will be available for the next 30 days. You can go ahead and register with Microsoft, avail the 16,000 INR and start using for your learning and training. This will be discussed once we are into the training module. I'll show you how to go ahead and register an account by connecting to the account and how to go ahead and use it. My account is not a free tier account. I'm using a pay-as-you-go subscription. For you, it will be a free trial subscription. Okay, so in that way, you will take the benefits of Microsoft Azure Cloud Platform.
Thank you.
Welcome. So participants, do we have any more questions? And participants, coming up to the DevOps services, along with DevOps services, we will be building the automation. We'll be targeting the automation. We will go ahead and target the automation. And there are some third-party services also we use for your information. Not only Azure services, we use third-party services. Third-party services I'm listing for you for your information. We will be using services like Git, GitHub, We use Jenkins, third-party services. We use Packer. We use Terraform, Docker, and Kubernetes. These are very much third-party services that Azure has nothing to do with these services, but still we will be using them into our DevOps pipeline. Because industry is not just confined to Azure services only, that only with Azure services you will build an amazing pipeline. Nope, you will not be able to do that. Industry expects not only with Azure services, what are the other? Because participants, I'll tell you, even before companies, when they were running into cloud, even before companies running into cloud, they were already using these services upfront. They were using Git to keep a track of their version control, source code management. They're already using, without cloud, they're using Kubernetes for many of the applications they were developing. Dockers they're developing. Because of the cloud, now automation coming in, they're using Terraform, Packer. But there is already a set of tools and services they're already using even before cloud was adapted. Because of cloud adoption, they're using all these tools. Now they want, if they're using these tools, how will you go ahead and use these tools and integrate with Azure? Because that is where DevOps engineering is on about. How do you go ahead and build those tools or integrate those tools to build your pipeline? That is the major target that we have in our building pipeline. So we build pipelines by placing our code in a GitHub repo, by building it using Jenkins pipelines. We build images for Azure by involving Packer. Complete automation, we will use Terraform, and we will use Kubernetes for our container application development involving Azure Kubernetes Service, AKS, Azure Kubernetes Service. These are very powerful and recommended tools and services for you people. This will be very, very helpful for you. What happens generally, people have a very different perception. The perception, I'll tell you. The perception that people have is this. They only focus on Azure DevOps. If I say they will only focus on Azure DevOps for their learning, that's a kind of challenge that I have personally seen with people doing it. Because they will only keep them with a clear mind. They will keep a mindset that is like they'll only focus on Azure DevOps engineering, Azure DevOps engineering. If you look at their branding, DevOps engineers are developers or infrastructure administrators who have subject matter expertise working with people, processes, and certain tools they have to offer. So Azure cannot provide all the tools for you. So they expect that you have tools and services from other segments like source code management. If you look at what is your role, the role will help you to handle code management, infrastructure, version control, security, compliance, continuous integration, delivery. So if you look at all these categories of the tools and services, you'll find there are lot of third-party tools that are doing their very much best in this segment of code, infrastructure, compliance. Though Azure offers services, they are outperformed by the third-party tools. So what people do a mistake is that when coming back to the point, people only focus on just building skill set with regards to Azure DevOps only. But in real life, when you go and do a job, you are expected to also work with these category of tools that are plenty in number. And that is why we are using even third-party tools, that how third-party tools we will use in integration with Azure DevOps. That is the major difference that we go ahead and give you a value addition to you people. If you focus on Azure DevOps, happily you will go and do your Azure DevOps. Why? It's purely about the Azure sources services that are offered under compute, storage, networking, databases. From there, how do you go and implement the services? Job is done. But it's not the only thing that is left for you, or you have to work with other tools. So participants, you should know how to work with other tools. That is a real job requirement. So in a simple nutshell, you should have infrastructure services overview, DevOps services overview, third-party tools, and integration with all of this. This will make you a right DevOps engineer in real life, not only just for the purpose of certification. This is just a path to help you that you can go and become yourself certified. But there are third-party tools that also require to be integrated. And we are very much focused integrating third-party tools. That's the real life job. So participants, stay tuned. There is a lot more to focus and discuss. So I'll hand over the call to admin. I'm handing over the call to you. I'm done from my side.